Hi there, fans. This is former WWE superstar and the most misunderstood man on the internet, Simon Gotch, here for Wrestling with Regret. If you aren't already subscribed, please do so and like, favorite, retweet all this stuff because Brian Zane makes money off it, and judging by how he's dressed today, he needs it.
I can't. I literally can't. I've spent so many years trying to wrap my head around this thing and make some sense of it, but I just can't do it. If I live to be 100, I'll never understand how this led to this and somehow ended on this. Oh, no! Ho, wrestling. What have you done? 2 weeks ago, I talked about TNA's Claire Lynch angle, a story about a woman who was hired to pretend to be pregnant in an effort to blackmail AJ Styles. Tale as old as time. That's still probably the most idiotic storyline involving children and paternity in recent wrestling history, but just a few years before, WWE seemed intent on making their own mark on the genre. It was an angle that seemed to begin with the purest of intentions, where fans would learn that Vince McMahon had an illegitimate child who just happened to be working for the company. Gosh, where have we seen that lately? But instead of getting an angle that at least had the potential to be interesting, what we got was months of cringeworthy attempts at both comedy and drama that pulled off neither of those things, that didn't draw a dime and didn't get anybody over. This angle was so insane that at times things went into literal Looney Tunes territory, but you'll see what I mean soon enough. Now, I guess in order to properly tell this story, we have to go back to where it all began. Memories. One of the hardest things about watching WWE is that sometimes something you see on TV will have a point, while others will not. Some skits and moments could lead to something big, while other times they're just done to satisfy someone's ego or get a laugh out of the handful of people who get the joke. When Vince blew himself up on television on that fateful night back in June of 2007, it was a moment that really could have gone either way. But it turns out McMahon's on-air death was part of something greater. A storyline which, had it gone as intended, I think could have been one of the best of the decade. The original plan seemed to be straight out of the soap operas that many fans and observers often compare wrestling to in the first place. As the weeks went on, it would be discovered that Linda McMahon was responsible for Vince's death and would be arrested. After that, Vince's video will reveal he had another son who worked for WWE. The bastard son would try to take his place as the rightful heir to the company's empire, leading to a feud with Triple H over control of the company, only for Vince to return from the dead and reveal it was all part of a plot to take total control of the company. Man, what an asshole! And speaking of assholes... Thank God I'm in it! Yes, according to all accounts, the man at the center of this angle was meant to be none other than Mr. Kennedy. It was kind of a perfect setup since the two did share a name.
You realize that my middle name is Kennedy, don't you? Yes, yeah, I do.
Well, that sounds like an interesting angle. I mean, there's drama, there's mystery, intrigue, a mid-card talent with a lot of upside getting big exposure. Sounds great. What could go wrong?
Some disturbing new details tonight in the apparent double murder-suicide at pro wrestler Chris Benoit's Georgia home.
Ooh, yeah, it's hard for a wrestling company to do a kayfabe death storyline when a wrestler commits a murder-suicide for real while on that same company's watch.
It's just a little dirty. It's still good. It's still good.
Okay, so Benoit's real death meant the company can no longer talk about Vince's fake death. Makes total sense, but just because that part of the angle had to be scrapped didn't mean they couldn't carry on. They were determined to make this work. All they had to do was just roll out Mr. Kennedy as the illegitimate son and get the ball rolling again, and then...
It's just a little slimy. It's still good. It's still good.
Okay, so first they lost the plot point that would begin the mystery son angle, and now they've lost the mystery son after Kennedy was suspended for being implicated in a steroid ring. Okay, great. Now what? On the August 6th episode of Raw, Vince's return to TV ended on a cliffhanger when he found out he was being slapped with a paternity suit and that his illegitimate child was working for the company. After more than a frickin' month of build which saw the aforementioned Mr. Kennedy teased as the offspring but then written off TV for his suspension, the lawyer representing the unseen mother offered a bevy of clever clues to help determine just who was the product of Vince's semen. Hey, those weren't my words, there's a precedent to that.
And the product of my semen is my son's shame.
If you enjoy the game Guess Who, then this bit was right up your alley, as wrestlers would leave the ringside area with each subsequent clue.
Your illegitimate son is not extreme. Your son has a fondness for gold. Your son's skin is fair.
You mean my son is Caucasian? You mean my son is Caucasian?
Until finally it was down to, hey, Sandman, I think you missed your cue to leave. Until finally it was down to Triple H.
Your son loves to play the game.
Oh my gosh!
Well, based on their respective ages, it's not totally implausible. I guess the DX McMahon feud could use another wrinkle or two. Sure would make future family gatherings a bit awkward, but sure, what the hell? Let's just roll with it.
Whether that game be hide and seek or as seen last Friday night on SmackDown, marbles, Hornswoggle.
What? Oh, the little bastard! It's just a little airborne. It's still good. It's still good.
It's good.
I know.
This twist was already strange, made even stranger by the fact that for the entire duration of the storyline, Hornswoggle, who is actually an adult, was regarded in storyline as a toddler because, duh, he's short. When Swoggle was named the bastard son, gone was any semblance of hope this angle would be in the realm of dramatics. See, the company has multiple decades of experience of infantilizing little people. It goes at least as far back as WrestleMania 3, when Hillbilly Jim treated the established, decorated wrestlers on his team like they were Ewoks.
I'm not really worried about myself in this match here because I know how King Kong Bundy is, and I believe I can take whatever he dishes out. But I'm worried about my little buddies here.
Then there was that time in 1999 when Mick Foley stole The Rock's bounty money from the Royal Rumble, then wanted to buy Max Mini as if he were a kid's toy.
My kids are gonna love this guy. I'll take them over. We have nothing fun. 3
And who could forget SmackDown's ill-fated Juniors division from 2005, created by Johnny Ace out of pure spite for cruiserweights and treated solely as a comedy act.
The juniors are back, and they're climbing the walls.
So with all this evidence, it seems very clear they're going to make this out to be a total laugh riot.
I don't want you in my family. No. You're a disgrace to my family. You're a disgrace to me. Get the hell out of my ring, and you get the hell out of my life.
Comedy gold. As the weeks went on, Vince would show his disdain for his new son, constantly putting him in harm's way or otherwise devising a scheme designed to humiliate him out of what he called tough love. Take, for instance, one night on Raw when Hornswoggle was set up by his own father and found himself cornered by Carlito. Cue the Scott Hall gif. There you go. What is he doing? No. Don't do it, Carlito. Please don't. Can we just go back to the time when he was the Cruiserweight champion? That sounds much better right about now. As Vince's lackey, Jonathan Coachman was often left to deal with Hornswoggle's mischief, leading to a side feud between the two, featuring, you guessed it, more cartoon hijinks. It's too bad we never got to see him dress up like a pretty lady to try and fool the coach. Speaking of pretty ladies, out came Melina to surprisingly ask him out on a date. When she was asked about it by Jillian Hall backstage, Melina let the truth come out.
I made a deal with Jonathan Coachman. He said if I took him out on a date that I'll get a shot at the women's championship.
Then later that night, Hornswoggle Dunn went and made it creepy. Haha, being sexually assaulted by a pervy leprechaun is top-notch comedy. I don't think it was ever established that Hornswoggle became wise to the deception, so pretty much everything he did to Melina here wasn't out of revenge, but out of pure lust. But it's okay if he does that, he doesn't know any better, he's just a playful child, with earrings. And a full beard. And tattoos. What is wrong with this company? By Survivor Series, Big Daddy Vince was no longer trying to hide his inexplicable hatred of Hornswoggle, putting him in a match against the Great Khali, and even wrestling him on his own. After Horny got the jump on Vince in round 1, the CEO upped the ante in a cage match. Considering we've now established that Hornswoggle is a literal cartoon character in this universe, I'm kind of surprised Vince didn't just get Judge Doom to bust out his big bucket of dip to finish him off for good. Did I mention they were treating Hornswoggle as a child in this storyline? Is the sight of a 60-something-year-old man whipping a little person portraying a toddler supposed to get people into the show? Is it meant to drive up ratings and sell tickets? Someone, please tell me, where's the money? What's the attraction? Just give us the payoff already. What is the...
Hornswoggle is not your son.
No. See, the ideal payoff I was imagining was when everyone involved gets launched into the sun to put us out of our misery. After an astounding 6 months of this nonsense, Finlay and JBL were unfortunately sucked into the storyline's orbit. Bradshaw revealed to Vince that Finlay had been Swoggle's father the entire time, working with the rest of the McMahon family to conspire against Vince. For which he gained zero benefit, by the way, so good for him. The following week, Finlay confessed he really was Horny's dad. It actually makes a lot of sense since the two were originally aligned back in 2006. This is back when Hornswoggle was called the little bastard and... Oh, I finally get the name now! Yet despite this connection, it somehow took Finlay months of witnessing all this abuse for him to finally come forward. So with Finlay now assuming paternity of old Horny, now we're going to get that match between him and Vince, yeah? A father stepping up for the love of his grown-up/infant son against the most powerful man in WWE? Yeah, okay. Or that. Even though Finlay had been placed into an angle that by its mere connection to a McMahon made it one of the most important ones on Raw at the time, he was still not big enough a star to actually fight Vince for Hornswoggle's honor. No, Finlay needed someone who was more at his level, like a post-World Championship reign JBL. The match was set for WrestleMania 24, where the two would fight in a Belfast brawl. Don't look for Vince to have a say in this matter anymore, because he's miles away from this angle as soon as he's taken off the hook. Now that I think about it, did this storyline inspire Dixie Carter's sudden lack of involvement in the Claire Lynch angle too?
What? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding?
On a show that also featured Edge vs. The Undertaker in a classic world title match, Shawn Michaels retiring Ric Flair, and the huge crossover match of Big Show vs. Floyd Mayweather, the event kicked off with the culmination of an angle which, in case you forgot, began with Mr. McMahon dying. At first the show began with some rain, like I can only imagine was a sign from God, but the Lord works in mysterious ways, and it turns out he has a twisted sense of humor. Oh, no! Mwah! So in the end, after all the weeks and months of toil and suffering and abuse, and that's just for the fans, the angle finally ended with the villain going over, Vince's position of power no longer in jeopardy, and his family members back to the drawing board. What a storybook ending! After WrestleMania, the relationship between Finlay and Hornswoggle outlived its last remaining shred of relevancy and fan intrigue that most people would argue never existed in the first place. But bless them for trying, Swoggle would accompany his daddy to ringside every week until the pair was finally split up by the 2009 supplemental draft. I've mentioned before how the mid-2000s were a dire period for WWE in a creative sense, but I do give them credit for trying to salvage the bastard son angle after Chris Benoit's death compromised everything. That being said, maybe they should have known when to quit while they were ahead. Whether or not the storyline was inaudible, it was still plagued with problems. The issue of treating a grown man like a child simply due to his physical stature, the last-minute additions of Finlay and JBL, the lack of a satisfying payoff, and most important of all, the lack of consistency. The tone of the angle flip-flopped from cartoony and comedic to serious and traumatic from week to week, sometimes both in a single episode. Was this meant to make the kids in the audience laugh or cry? I don't think even the writers knew. Finlay would stay with the company until 2011 when he got in trouble for authorizing the interruption of the national anthem at a house show, but would come back as a producer 1 year later. By the time he was released in 2016, Hornswoggle would spend the rest of his days in the company as a mascot for various groups, and of course was revealed as the anonymous Raw GM in 2012, and just ruining things left and right. Well, after the last couple of weeks, I'm officially done talking about wrestling storylines involving paternity scandals. I just want to move on from things involving pregnancies and absentee fathers and... Pass.